Adele, I am just absolutely stoked for this conversation because I had so much fun talking to you on the phone a couple weeks ago. And now finally we are getting around to recording this podcast. So I'm glad you're here.
Awesome. I'm honored and delighted to continue and that you invited me on, Sue.
Oh
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, and we will go from there.
Absolutely. So my name is Adele DiMarco, and I am the founder, and as I refer to myself as the lead steward of the company Yin Ovate. Yin like yin yang. So innovating from the inside out, as I refer to Yinovate. That's what Yinovate means, to innovate from the inside out. I have been supporting organizations for over 20 years now. So I have worked with and guided hundreds of organizations, thousands of leaders up until this point of really clarifying. I now have the courage to use the language through their heart and from their soul, who they are individually as leaders, and in working with their organizations, who that organization is and what it is bringing to the world.
Do you find when you work with organizations like that, when they actually go into the heart of who they are, like who the people are, that there's a deeper sense of awareness and purpose for the organization that kind of almost takes them to another level as they do that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really a discovery process, or really an uncovering process, because that journey isn't about bringing something new in. It's about revealing what's already there, what's already been operating, whether we're talking about the individual leader and who they are as a leader. And I've been referring to it more and more as the legacy that they're here to leave as a leader, whether they're in their 20s or 40s or 70s. We're all on that journey, and that's really what the work of tapping into your heart and soul is revealing the highest truth of who you are and the way that you are meant to serve the whole of society.
That's not a natural disposition, is it? People don't naturally gravitate towards, hey, what's my highest, best power in life here?
they don't they don't naturally, and but when you invite them into the conversation, they do. But interestingly, their highest and best version of themselves is always there somewhere. It may only get like 10% airtime. And with other people, if to your point, if they're more intentional about it and really care about being their highest and best version of themselves, maybe that part of themselves gets 50 or 60 or 70%. But the thing is, it's always there operating. And same with, especially if an organization has been in existence for a while. In the more recent years, I've come to really find a high resonance and a passion and a joy around working with multi-generational family businesses, because in that case, that heart and soul is definitely beating. I mean, they may not have ever thought of it that way, but it's definitely there, and it's what's kept the company going.
Oh,
um,
interesting. All right. Well, wait, let's take a step back a minute,
yeah.
because if somebody's listening to this and they're going like, well, myself, like getting in touch with what my higher powers are, things like that. Let's take a step back and just, how do you help people see that in themselves? When you walk into an organization, you're like, okay, we're going to find the heart and soul that beats, for each and every one of you. And somebody's like, what the hell are you talking about? I have no idea what that is.
Right.
I'm sure you come across somebody that looks at you like that, like you have three heads, right?
It can, but you know what I find, at least because I've been following my heart and soul, I don't get connected with them as often, especially since I've been doing this for 20 years. I kind of end up being naturally kind of put in the path of people who are. But I do have a framework that I show with people. It's on one page. I don't know if I can pull it up and show you. It may not be relevant, but that helps them see how the whole of their organization all fits together. It's a model that I co-created over 15 years ago with a former business partner woman who was also a mentor of mine for years. And we call it the cycle of sustaining performance and impact. That's a big mouthful. I like to call it the flow model, that, that this is attending to these aspects helps the organization just stay in flow, like more efficient, more effective, more cohesive, a greater sense of fulfillment with everybody, right? Whether the company's making widgets or if it's a nonprofit even. that, that's really where I cut my teeth in the beginning, because nonprofits, that heart and soul is really talking about their purpose or and vision.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I call it heart and soul now. I finally have the courage, like I said, to call it that. But purpose and vision are words and terms that people are familiar with. But because that's what really makes up the heart and soul is, your purpose. Why do you exist? What are you here to accomplish? The vision, which is a certainly a heart conversation, because your vision is what you would love to bring into fruition, right? Either for yourself
Yeah.
personally and or for your company. And when you're either the founder of a nonprofit or the executive owner of a privately held company, especially if it's a family held company, that personal vision and the company vision have a lot of overlap,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's coming through and from you.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about before we go into vision. And I know before we even hit record, we were like, oh wait, let's capture this idea of setting visions for ourselves. Before we go there, talk about your holistic approach to working with teams that might be different from a traditional approach. And I feel like when you pull in the holistic view and how you use that framework, it'll lead us into these other areas that all these other questions I have in areas we want to talk about.
Great, great. Okay, so holistic. So yes, I work when the way I think of holistic, even in an organization, that term holistic has a couple of different ways of applying. First of all, holistic, I've trained in systems. I've trained in systems. My background is in organizational behavior. My background in training is in organizational behavior and in cultural anthropology. So and neurobiology before that. So I've been trained in systems in a multitude of ways. So I approach any organization as a system. So I'm always thinking about the levels of system, meaning in everyday language, individual people, the teams, whether it's one team or a myriad of teams on that level, and then the ownership or the executive level at the top, and maybe even if it's a family business, the individual family owners. And so really thinking about how do all those players, so to speak, work together? How does it work together cohesively as a system? And when I'm then the other way that I apply it is on an individual level. What really matters most to you about your own personal health and well-being, your own sense of calling in the world, how well you're able to be in relationship with others, whether it's a personal romantic relationship, whether it's relationships with your own family and friends, whether you're a single person, a single parent, in a partnership without children, because all that relationship stuff comes to life at work, in the workplace,
Right.
right? In your organizational life. And then even your time and money freedom. We all
Mm.
have a finite amount of time on this planet. And money is really just a symbol for freedom as well. But in the world of work, in the world of business, time and money are big currencies that we're trading in. So, on an individual level, holistic means kind of thinking about those dimensions of one's life and finding what's at the core of that for that individual person, which really is where your vision comes in, right? And so, getting clear on how can all of that come into alignment, and then bringing that individual person in the context of at work, then how does that come into play with what the place that you work for is up to, right? How is what you as an individual would love to accomplish for your life? How is it, can you see how it's aligned to what that company or that organization is up to in the world?
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So if I understand you correctly, you go into a company, you take the whole company, but then you also analyze the people in it and then take a whole view of like, okay, this is the sole purpose, like this is the overarching desire or heartbeat of what this company embodies. And then you look at each of the people that are involved and then find out like what are their deepest needs, what are their deepest passions and visions and so forth, and then how that applies to the company that you're in and how everybody kind of works together holistically. Did I Did I kind
Yes,
of
I mean, I will tell you, Sue, like, those are all the big pieces, like, if I use the
Yeah.
metaphor of a jigsaw puzzle, those are all the pieces of the puzzle that we just kinda dumped out onto the
Right.
table,
Yeah, yeah,
and the way I go about it with every organization is completely different. Like, those are
yeah.
always
Right.
all the pieces, right? But I've also learned the art of meeting people where they are, so I typically start with the CEOs, COOs at the top, and I just meet them with where they are. What's
Mhm.
their current need and pain? I always show them, like, everything I just said. Well, part of it, I have this roadmap for it. On an organizational level, the way that all fits together is there's the soul at the center, which is your mission, your vision, your values, and your identity, meaning really what do you want, what are you known for, what do you want to be known for, and that's another way of saying your brand or your brand promise.
Mhm.
So the roadmap has four circles, the soul at the center, and then that informs another body of work called strategy, which most organizations are more familiar with. Setting goals, what are your tactics, etc. But I take them, I that's wherever their energy wants to go, I follow them. Um,
Mhm.
Strategy is often where we start because that's, strategic planning. That's more of a common thing that companies
Yeah.
and organizations know they need to do. In the nonprofit world, funders want them to have a strategic plan. So it goes soul, and then soul informs strategy, and then strategy informs another body of work that's less common but really important called design. How then is your strategy, how is that playing out into processes and practices and your incentives and rewards, like to make sure that's all in alignment? And then the
Mhm.
fourth body of work is all around capacity, right? Which is your powerhouse, your engine, your for your people, right? Do you not only do you have enough people, but the people who you have, do they have the capacity to deliver on where you're saying you want the organization to go? And so that's where I've done work over the years with different organizations, helping them actually, because usually when I ask that question, most organizations aren't able to answer it because they
Mm.
haven't really thought about it. And coming back to if I had one word to summarize all of this on the organizational level, it's alignment, really, right? Clarifying who the company is, what they want to be known for, and then going about the business of bringing everything into alignment, right? And including the capacity of the people that you are needing to deliver on what it is you say that you're up to in the world.
Yes, alignment is that word that we hear a lot of. How do you define alignment, and what does that look like when you help somebody else find theirs?
Yeah, well, it's another fun discovery process. I mean, one of the places I always start is with vision, right? Because vision is both an expression of who you are now, as well as a future version of where you would love to be. Not kind of like to be, or not where you think you should be,
Or
but
where somebody else tells you you
or
should
where,
be?
God forbid, yes, that's a big piece
That's a
of work.
big problem. That's a big how many people, like, set their vision because, mom told me to go to college because I should be an engineer? Like, right there's somebody else setting your vision for you, and you don't even realize it.
No, and that's really, I mean, this is a sidebar, Sue, but
Yeah.
really, if I had to summarize what Innovate is really up to in the world in terms of this innovating from the inside out, it's shifting. The Innovate process is about shifting individually, team, organization, from being defined from the outside in, which is what you just gave an example for, right? If you're a young person, having your parents tell you what you're supposed to do, having the church tell you what you're supposed to do, or a part of you that's really just a kind of a part of your personality that's an internalized version of your parents telling you what you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
To shifting from being outside in led to being inside out led. And inside out led is really what I consider the core and the start of an alignment journey. And it's really about coming in touch with your own sovereign power, the authentic power that's from within you, that's always there, that's been there from the moment you were born. And so it's really in many ways a process of coming home. Alignment is a process, I think, of coming home to your heart, of who you truly are. And the more we're the gentle process of that awareness naturally brings one's life when we allow it to. That's a big part of the journey, is letting
If we
go
allow
of
it.
surrendering and letting go of, that was a big journey for me, is letting go of what other people think.
Ah,
The
isn't
should.
that the killer?
Oh
It's
my
a
God.
killer sometimes,
I didn't even
because
know how many people I'd rented space to in my head,
yeah,
telling me what I should
yeah,
do and what they would think and what they and yeah, it's I'm sitting here like saying it in words, but this is deep mental
yeah.
and emotional work.
Yeah. Yeah. How much do we like look to other people for external validation when really we don't need it? It's only about us. Like it's only about what we validate on the inside for ourselves rather than looking at it from the outside. But how much pressure we put on ourselves because we want to do something, because if we do or don't do it, it's because what we think somebody else might think or what it looks like on Facebook, or, it's not living, I would say it's not living in your authentic self, is it?
Exactly. That's really what alignment is about too, is
Yeah.
having your life come back to being designed from your authentic self. That term gets more and more play these days.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, before we go even further, how do you define authentic self so that those listening are like, yeah, okay, I get that.
sure. Yeah, authentic self, it comes back to the way I think of it, is who you are through your heart and from your soul. And I don't mean soul in some type of religious context that's going to be judged at some judgment day. I mean, I think it's like that personalized expression of the power that's breathing you, right? And we really, I mean, that's the miracle of life. Like literally, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, right? That every single one of us has a unique and individual fingerprints, right? The criminal
Hmm.
justice system knows all about that. But on that same level, that fingerprint is really just a reflection on a deeper level of who we are uniquely here in the world to be and to serve and to give from.
What do you think are some of the big barriers that we're facing today that keep us from finding who our true authentic self is?
Well, that's a great question. So many distractions, right? I mean, on the one hand, it's all of what the outside world tells us we should be. And really, I mean, innocently, where that desire comes from is a deep sense of wanting to belong,
Yeah.
of wanting to be accepted, right? I mean, we're social creatures. We have a bit of a tribal nature, right? We all want to belong and fit in, and that sense of even just knowing we exist, right? That, like, to have our existence validated. And so it's a very understandable process of wanting others validation, right? Wanting others to say that we're important, or our ideas are good, or that we matter. Again, that's been a huge part of my personal journey, even though I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. So I think it's that. I think there's just so many distractions, right? In general, just
How about
distractions.
internal distractions? The externals, they're the easy ones. I mean, let's
Yeah.
face it. You got the phone, you got the internet, you've got social media, anything like that's the external stuff. How about the internal distractors?
The internal distractors are, I mean, the many disguises of fear, right? The fear, well, like I said, the fear that we won't belong, the fear that we'll be rejected, the fear that we might miss out on something, right? If we don't take the time, because really what it takes to know your authentic self is time to pause and breathe and just reflect, right? Time to really get to know oneself, right? Of all the relationships in our lives, the most important relationship is the one that we have with ourselves. And to value ourselves enough to give ourselves the time to invest in the time to know who we really are. Like, what really matters to me? What lights me up and brings me joy authentically? Again, it's like letting go of the layers of internal shoulds, right? Because even if we're no longer, living in our parents' house, they still take up internal mental and emotional real estate. The voice of our parents still lives there. And in fact,
Mhm.
Sidebar was one of my early Gestalt mentors said to me about the workplace, given I'm a workplace consultant, essentially, change management. And he said, Adele, everybody's just working through their mommy and daddy issues at work because those voices and those personalities take up interior space inside us by telling us who we should be and what's good and what's bad and what's considered a value, right, in
Yeah.
the world.
It's hard work. That's hard work that I mean, I think sometimes people just don't want to do. And it takes a lot of courage to do that internal hard work. To
Yes, yes. One of my favorite authors of a book that was written in 1910. It's called I'm not crazy about the title because it kind of tends some people in the other direction. It's called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. And one of my favorite lines in the book, he talks about this. He was, even though it was written in 1910, he was really kind of alluding to quantum physics and to mindset big time, and to the fact that our thoughts create our reality. And one of the points he makes is about thinking, and that most of us are not thinking authentic. We're not thinking our own thoughts that come from this authentic self. We're actually, most people are just running thoughts that have just been programmed into us from the outside world. And he makes the point that this original thinking, authentic thinking, is the hardest work in the world. It takes the most, as you said, courage, which I also refer to as heart, and strength, which is will, divine will. I mean, willpower only lasts, some willpower, but that only lasts so long. Our
right.
higher power will. And it takes courage because, when we go to know ourselves, we also, there's a lot of pain in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the harsh reality of, what happens when we look at who we really are and what if we don't like what we see? And then you have to contend with that and work through it and it come to a point where it's like, okay, it's okay. I've got all these different things that are of me, but at the end of the day, it's that hard work to just love who you are. And I would think people struggle. I mean, I struggle with loving myself. Like it's been a process and work for myself
Yeah.
to get to the point where I say, okay, I've come to not only just accept the person that I am, but I actually love the person that I am. And it's not a self-narcissistic kind of love. That's not what I'm talking about. It's talking about just loving those qualities in life, those things that I've done, whether that maybe I'm not so proud of, but just accepting that they happened and then loving the deeper soul for just who I am, right where I'm at. I love that you brought up that quote that said, our thoughts create our reality.
Mhm.
I want to go back to vision setting and goal setting and being in alignment with setting those goals in that future version of yourself and holding that, like, right, you and I are talking, this is the reality at this moment. We don't know what's in the next moment, we just have this moment. So when you think about goal setting, that can be challenging to create because you only have this moment right here and you only have past experience. And I know I want to be somewhere else, but it's hard coming up with where that somewhere else wants
Yeah.
to be in the future.
I mean, yeah, that's one of the internal challenges, I think. I mean, part of me has a theory just from coming from the Midwest and then moving out to the West Coast, which is the West Coast, the culture out here is, I consider the West Coast in the United States, it's just a lot of creative energy, right? And people are comfortable with dreaming and visioning. And coming from the Midwest, it was almost like dreaming and having a vision was almost a sense of like, you were for yourself personally,
Yeah.
especially. It's like you're responsible, right? You just need to keep your head down and keep working and
Grind it out, baby.
grind it out, man. Dreams are for fools and children and Disneyland. So I do think, because we have to tap into that part of us that maybe has been a little squelched by religion or society and pull up that power of imagination. to truly allow ourselves to imagine, to give ourselves permission to even get in touch with what would I absolutely love for my life. And I've been amazed in working with so many people over the years on tapping into the power of a dream, and which interestingly I think is one of the unique American contributions to the body of work, the new thought, if you will, body of work that Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, in the Transcendental Movement, the early and mid 1800s in the United States, really contributed to this body of work of the power of imagining
Mm.
a future that you would love. Now, in some ways, it's a future, but the truth of it is, these are a little bit of Jedi mind tricks. That future you bring into the now. And tying your question in even to a comment you just made before about the challenge of tapping into our authentic self and having to navigate the pain and the loss and the grief that's really in there, that is really probably one of the greatest inhibitors of us living a life that we would love. I'm a big proponent of the practice of gratitude, and not from a humble sense like I need to just, be grateful for what, keep your head down and just be grateful for what you're given. And that's actually what I came into visioning, believing that I should just be grateful for what I have and therefore I should
Yeah.
not vision, right? Just be grateful for what you have. You can be grateful for what you have and want more. It's okay.
They
They're
are
not
exclusive one another. They don't have to go together. Like you can be grateful for what you have. And yeah, it's okay to want something else in life. It doesn't mean you're not grateful.
right. And
Yeah.
knowing what else you want in life is part of getting to know yourself
Yeah.
and
It's part of the
validating
journey.
yourself. It's part of the journey. And the other thing that is a really big proponent, that the way I approach things is more from that appreciative approach, is really the more we celebrate and recognize the things that we're good at. This is a paradox, what I'm going to share. The more we recognize what we're good at, what we're proud of, what we've accomplished, I call it making emotional deposits, cha-ching, in our sense of self bank account. The more we do that, paradoxically, the more we're actually building our capacity to face the hard stuff. And I actually believe that the reason that so many people are not able to manage their pain and to actually confront the hard things is because they haven't given themselves enough credit and accolade and recognition for the good that they have done.
Oh, ouch. That just hit me. It hit me personally because I spent my entire life just doing and never celebrating the accomplishments.
Mm.
I mean, and for me personally, the reason I probably didn't allow myself to celebrate the accomplishment is because at least this is me personally, when you're a high achieving kind of person and you
Yes.
set that high bar, when you hit that thing that you set the bar for, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I set the bar. What's next? And then
Yes.
you go to the next thing, like, okay, I set that bar, I accomplished that goal. Okay, what's next? It was just something that you check off in your brain.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got that. You don't really acknowledge or celebrate the accomplishment. And it ties back into gratitude. So I love that you brought that up and that it's not just a wishy washy carte blanche gratitude. Like, yeah, just be grateful for what you have. A mind hack. Let's go to Jedi mind hacks that I was doing lately. It was I write down three things I'm grateful for, and I did that for a while. I would say a good year, but the last couple weeks, I forget what I was listening to, but it was not just write down what you're grateful for, but write down why you're grateful for it.
I like
What a big game changer that was for me.
that. That's powerful.
I have to tell you, extremely powerful for me because once I not only said, okay, I'm grateful for that thing, when you put the why to it, then it gives meaning to the thing that you're grateful for rather than just saying you're grateful for it.
I love it. And what
I,
comes up for me right away is that why question is bringing you closer to your authentic self.
yes.
It's
Yes.
getting
Yeah.
to know yourself.
Right. Right. And it ties back into celebrating the accomplishments because in the gratitude, what I also started doing was I'm like, okay, what did I accomplish for this day? Can I be grateful for that? Why am
Yeah,
I grateful for that? How did I do? So it's kind of like this upward motion spiral that,
absolutely.
that puts your brain into this higher awareness of being grateful for the things that are around you, or grateful for the stuff that you're doing. Let's talk about energies.
Sure, sure. If we do, I
Okay.
just want to put one more little pin on what you're
Oh,
saying about
sure.
the gratitude and the why. The other practice that one of my earlier mentors shared with me that I do as well in the gratitude practice, I love the why. I'm going to start playing with that one too, is to write down what you're proud of. Right.
Mm,
So grateful for can be something that either you personally had a contribution in or you didn't. For example, one of the things that resulted in me personally moving from the Midwest, I was in Indiana and then Ohio for 25 years, is I so many times I wrote down I was grateful when the sun came out. Right. And any of those of us who grew up around the Midwest know that we get about, well, most people actually don't know, but there's about a cumulative of 8 months without sun.
oh,
And
wow.
so I started to realize how often I was writing down, I'm grateful that the sun came out and that the sun was out today. So it was almost, I wasn't doing the why yet, but I started to realize how often I was writing that down. And I was like, wow, the sun makes a huge difference in my life. So, anyhow, that's an example of you can write down things that you're grateful for that you personally had no
Yes.
role in happening, right?
Right.
When you write down what you're proud of, and I have so many even executives I have coached are so uncomfortable in the beginning with this question of including writing down what you're proud of with your gratitude practice as part of your gratitude practice because what you're proud of is something that you personally had a role in making happen or coming to fruition.
Why do you think it's hard for somebody to write down what they're proud of?
I think it goes back to even your point earlier, right? The point that you were making about we're not used to taking our own inventory of things that we're good at. It goes back to self worth, right? I was doing some workshopping with, and asked them what their definition of ego is, and they said ego either tells you that you are the shit or that you're a piece of shit. And I just thought that was hilarious, right? It's either like your ego either tells you you're better than everyone else, or it tells you that you're less than everyone else. And depending on kind of like, I think most of us have a propensity for one or the other. And so because our ego then just becomes a lens through which we perceive things. And if it's the one that thinks that we're not as good as everyone else, then we continue to just collect data that affirms that. So when
Right.
somebody comes around and says to start talking about reflecting on what you're proud of, you're like, wait a minute, this is a whole new set of data. This is a whole new pair of glasses for me to perceive myself through. And even people who've accomplished amazing things have this as their internal operating system.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, just to put a pin in it, I'm a big fan here. I'm big at propping up other great coaches. Dan Sullivan, who's been doing work with entrepreneurs for 50 plus years, but his work, Gap versus Gain, I was like, oh my God, he wrote my book because I hadn't read it, but it's just an approach, right? But it validates that there's a pattern with highly success oriented and driven people, right? We're always holding that ideal, which is another way of talking about vision. And we're always measuring ourselves with where we are now compared to our ideal versus measuring ourselves still holding that ideal, but then looking at what have I accomplished? How much have I really done? Which when
Yeah.
we slow down and put that pair of glasses on, we're like, again, that's the power of the pause, the power of slowing down and reflecting. I call it harvesting of like, wow. When I have, I mean, again, highly successful CEOs and owners do that exercise and they blow themselves away. Right.
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Think
holding.
about where you were a year ago or 5 years ago or
Yeah.
10 years ago. I mean,
And
anybody can ask that of themselves and then go, holy moly.
right. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're not still, I mean, I was with a group of executives in November. They had just high performing company. 70 years in existence. They just had their record profit year. And this was a room full of men, 20 men. And Sue, they were so resistant to celebrating
Mm.
this major accomplishment because they verbalized. I didn't even have to ask them why. They verbalized that they were afraid if they celebrated their win, it was going to make them soft and it was somehow going to compromise their desire and drive to get better.
How did you help them turn that around then to help them celebrate that win?
Yeah, that they can, it's a both and. So that's another one of my principles. I have a set of 4 principles with Innovate, and I want to come back to positive and negative energy. I haven't forgotten about
Yeah,
that.
no, it's not good.
But one of my principles is I have 4 core principles with innovating. And one of them is that your thoughts create your reality. And along with that, the power of and thinking, of really being able to shift our thinking from either or, right? So those guys, I pointed out to them, hey, that's an either or thought because I coach them on these
Mhm.
principles. And thinking is also referred to as polarity management. I said you're thinking that you can either celebrate or ignore it. I said you can do both. You can celebrate your win and still get better. And I said to them, the most successful driven people do both. I said, look at this was in Northeast Ohio. You've got LeBron James. Now you even have the Kelsey brothers, right? That hail out of Northeast Ohio. I said, the greats, just because they win multiple times doesn't mean that they don't keep getting better. One doesn't cancel the other one out. And I could feel the room shift.
Yeah, you just blew their mind because you just gave them a different way of thinking. You know what? The power of our words is
Yes.
amazing.
Words create
And
worlds.
yeah, and I don't think people grasp the enormous value that needs to be placed on the words that we say to ourselves and then what we say to others. Like our words are currency, and we can choose to use them to for good, and we can take away and we can add with our words. And just the power right there. I mean, right in that example, the power of your words to shift their focus and shift how they viewed a situation. I bet that room wound up celebrating what it was that they had accomplished because you helped them to see it was an and. You can celebrate this and you can get better and you can do it again. It's amazing when we give ourselves permission to do something that we didn't realize we could do.
Yes. Yes. Well said. And yes, I am a huge, it comes back to alignment and authentic self again, that our
Mhm.
words create worlds, right? And our words, the words that you nailed, that we speak to ourselves most powerfully, and then that we speak to others. And sometimes if we don't know the words that we're speaking to ourselves, you don't have to look very far. Just look at the words you're saying to others. And again, that's a process of slowing down and noticing, because the words that we use are a reflection. They're an insight. No, we don't need to hire an analyst to know what we're thinking. Just record yourself talking and map out your words that you're using. I think the most revolutionary question is to ask a person, well, what would you love for yourself? Not what would you like, not what would you should, as I said earlier, but what would you love? That, like, if you imagine tapping into that power, that higher power of imagination, a life that you would absolutely love to be living, what would that be like? And the exercise of tapping into that brings one into that vibration of joy and love just through the act of imagining it. Now that begins the alignment process, right? Tapping into the blueprint, really, of a life, living a life, being the person who's living a life that essentially is at the vibration of love instead of fear. Now, one of the things I'm a proponent of as well is, we're going to have fear thoughts. It's just part of being a human being on earth. And fear has all kinds of different disguises, right? It comes in this disguise of distraction or delay or dissuasion, right? You'll never do that. You can't do that. Who do you think you are? You'll lose your friends. I mean, the disguises of fear are very sophisticated, and they know our personal exact Achilles, right? Of what to tell us
Yeah.
we're, the message to say just to us that's going to kind of get us. But the Yinovate process, and again, it kind of comes back to this affirmative or appreciative approach, is to tap into the power of love and even love the fear thoughts. Instead of, I know over the years of different success coaches that kind of tell you to like, shut that fear down, tell it who's
Yeah.
boss, that's basically just fear playing with fear.
Do you think it's a sense of denying that something that is actually real inside of you? I mean, when you turn around and say, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid," but yet you've got this feeling going on in your body that's like, "Well, yeah, I kind of am afraid, but I'm going to take it one step further." I've learned that the body's physical response to fear is the same as excitement.
Yes.
And instead, if something comes up that's fearful, you say, okay, I'm fearful of this. I'm excited. Bring it on. Okay, I'm not going to deny my body is feeling this thing so I don't set up this contradiction in my mind, but I'm also going to acknowledge that what's going on is okay, it's fear, but you know what? It's excitement. I'm excited for this thing. Bring it on.
Yes, that's actually a principle in Gestalt, that fear, that anxiety and excitement are two sides of the same coin. So, and
Mhm.
some people would say that fear is under supported excitement, or anxiety is under supported
Yeah.
excitement.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I like the word even enthusiasm, because sometimes excitement, I had a mentor talking about this was, and the body is a so important part of it. And I love that there's more and more talk about the body. And like my original background is in neuroscience, right? So, going back to these negative and positive, if we've lived a life, which most people on earth have, there's no judgment here. There's no like calling people out. This is just called earth, If we've lived a life that's mostly been running fear patterns, fear thoughts, right? A thought is an electrical current, right? It can be measured. There is instrumentation that can measure the vibrational frequency of different emotions, right? And it's why we say, oh, that's fear is a lower vibration emotion. We can actually measure the electromagnetic frequency of it. Well, here's the thing, our central nervous system gets built by electrical currents running through it. So if we've been living a life of thinking, this is kind of the Joe Dispenza work, but it's something that I knew from my neuroscience background. If we've been living a life thinking fear thoughts, our central nervous system is essentially wired to run the vibrational currency of fear. Now, the metaphor I use for people is this is like needing to run your system, your operating system needs the wiring that's akin to an electrical extension cord that you could buy at a drugstore to plug your Christmas tree in, a small Christmas tree, right? There's not a lot of high currency, I think
Right.
conductancy, I think is the engineering term, right? It's conducting a lot of energy through it or running energy through it. When you start to think higher vibration thoughts like joy and love, like imagining the life that I would love. Oh my God, I would love to have a job that does, or I would love to generate that much income, or I would love to live in a place where the sun shines most of the year. That was my big love, right? I would love to have a partner of my life. All these things that are around, the laws of attraction and all of this, your body actually has to go through a process of rewiring itself. You basically have to shift your house. This is, I work with people in construction. Amazingly, I said, fear thoughts is like having a house that's wired for 110. And when you start thinking thoughts of love and joy, you need to rewire the whole house to 220. You have to have a central nervous system that's the equivalent of running high vibrational currency. And that's a process, and it requires patience and love and a lot of taking care of oneself and one physical body, a lot of, body work, and that love along the way, even when we fail, air quotes, right? Because that's how we learn, so that our body is taken care of, that it can rewire. Now, what happens then, once our body is able to hold that currency, once we've basically programming it by the practice of holding that vision, right? This is what's taught in the law of attraction. Once our body can hold that currency, that's where things just, it's right. That's why it's the law of attraction is actually considered a secondary law. The core law is the law of vibration. Once your body can hold the vibration of what brought that excitement, right? The joy, the
Mhm.
image, the ideal image of your life, it just it just comes right in. It just
Mm.
it's attract that's how attraction works. Is then our life just attracts it right in. And this brings us back to that point around excitement. What a very wise mentor who had been working with these laws for a long time said to me. She said, when that happens, Adele, what you'll find is you're actually not even excited when it happens because it feels so normal to you. You've actually rewired yourself to be a vibrational match for the vision that you've been holding, such that it's just kind of how your life unfolds.
That's just so encouraging to anybody listening that is stuck in this spot where they think that I'm stuck here. You know, I'm stuck in fear, or I'm stuck at this low place. I'm stuck where I don't want to be. Nobody's stuck. So I love it. I think I'm so excited about that. The other is you were talking about that compelling future vision of ourselves, something that we want, you know, whether it's more money or whether it's to be in a different place or a certain partner, and we hold on to that good feeling of what we want that future to look like. I
Or I would
jotted
actually say what we would love, even
what
higher.
we would love. Okay, we would love. That's like the power of manifestation, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can speak to my from my own journey. It doesn't always go like kind of when you start. So let's go back to the person you say who's listening, who's living a life of fear and who's living a life that's basically just a smaller version of a life than that we were intended to live, because we were all intended to live a life of greatness, and everyone's journey is unique, and there is the power of magic and miracles is that can facilitate, even if somebody's really into their destiny and astrology or something like that, there's always a wild card, and the wild card is tapping into your dream and going about the business of believing it's possible, right? Because step one is to tap into it. And then there's the real work is to become a match for it, to become the person who is living that, which is, having the courage to take small steps from that dream. Not so one of the biggest shifts for me in this journey, after I'd been doing work for over a decade with organizations and doing strategic planning and visioning, is I mentally imagined a vision as something outside of myself
Mm.
in the future. And a really powerful mentor of mine, Mary Morrissey, helped me see that really our vision is something that's inside us. Coming back to the start of our conversation, our authentic self, it's actually a dimension of ourself that's already in existence. It just lives at a different vibration called love. It's already alive inside us, speaking to us, whispering to us, telling us that we're really worth it. And so the magic is about starting to make choices from the dream, not toward the dream, from the dream.
Mm. Boy, that makes a difference.
Right. The hard, I mean, I don't want to dissuade anybody because it's always worth it. I mean, and living the life of following your dream and following, I mean, there's like 10,000 different people are going to tell you to follow your heart. I mean, it's part of my technology too. I
Yeah.
teach very specific heart technology from the Heart Math Institute. But the challenge is it does require a lot of courage because it doesn't always go like you think it's going to. I mean, I can speak to, I mean, part of my dream was that I would continue to be married to the man who I'd been married to for 20 years. And I had a little chapter of life that I was like, what's up, God, man? This was not in my dream. All of a sudden, my husband wanted a divorce after 20 years of marriage. I was like, wait a minute. This was not on my vision board.
Right.
And now that I'm 3 years from that, I can see, oh my goodness, absolutely. That was part of what had to happen for me to become the vibrational match for the life at least a part of the life, right? Now, so I had to let go. I knew I wanted a life partner. I'm now single and I'm okay with that and getting to know myself from that person. But the person who I was with wasn't an energetic fit for me to become like, as I was growing, we just were no longer a match for each other energetically. He just was not into growing. And you know what? Everybody has that freedom of choice.
Right. Right.
He wasn't interested in this bigger, fuller life in a place where the sun shines more in Southern California. He was into staying in the life that he had always known. And, even though part of me wanted to judge him for that, the truth is we all have the freedom to choose.
And you make a good point that when you were in the midst of it originally 3 years ago, you couldn't you
I could,
couldn't see why it was happening,
I,
and yeah, like and it takes 3 years out to look back. And how often do we think when we're going through something, it's like, I can't believe I'm going through this, but it takes the passage of time and whatever that thing is to pass. And then you go back and you look at it and you're like, oh, now I know why that's happening to me. If we could just restructure our brains to think when we're in the midst of something, just to embrace it and say, okay, there's something in this for me. It doesn't look positive at the moment, but there's something positive in here for me. And I'm not going to see it just yet. And I'm okay with it. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
okay
and
with
that's
it.
where that is the heavy work that took
Yeah,
a
that's heavy
lot
work.
of faith. And for me, it's even beyond the brain. I think of the brain as the hardwiring, the central nervous system. The
Mhm.
mind is different from the brain. The mind is our mental body. The mind is where the thought patterns live. And then the brain and the central nervous system are just the wiring that runs it. It's kind of like, the mind is the operating system and the thoughts that we're thinking
Right.
that are the operating system. And yeah, I mean, I was, basically uploading when you have start tapping into your vision and what you would love, you're basically starting to download a new operating system
Hmm.
called love. It's at the vibration of love. And the old operating system called fear that your body through the brain and the central nervous system is still wired for, right? It's a messy middle where you're downloading a new operating system. You're kind of battling the resistance of the old operating system, which by the way, the ego has been
Yeah.
running that show and is not excited about being removed from its job that it really liked of running that operating system. That's why it requires a lot of compassion and care for the ego so that it can rightfully take. It's like, hey, you're not being completely fired. You're just being given a role reassignment. Yes, I need you to be here on earth. You're not going away.
Right.
You're just being removed from the driver's seat and being put into the passenger seat.
Yeah. I've
Right.
heard it said that you tell your ego, thank you. Thank you, little ego. Thank you, old version of me. I've got this. Just sit over here now. Thank you. I've got the, you've
Yeah.
gotten me this far. Now it's time for the next chapter of life.
Yeah, and
It
that's
takes,
the messy middle, right?
yeah.
That I'm talking about, that 3-year time. That's where it comes back to some really like I would not have made it if had I not had, I mean this, I don't mean this in any kind of religious way, if I didn't have a level of faith in the process and a level of, I mean, I still kept my daily practices of gratitude and forgiveness. Those are my two little, those are the mind gym that I go to work out in every day to reprogram my new operating system, my mind, my mental body. I had to upgrade it. And so I had to just keep
Yeah.
going to the gym of writing my gratitudes, writing what I'm proud of, doing my forgiveness. Those are the two. They're almost like little, gratitude is bringing in and forgiveness is letting go. Forgiveness is like
Yeah.
spiritual hygiene, right? And gratitude is that workout, building that strength and muscle, because I slipped back into, and I still have to watch it, into that victim mindset, right? That's
Hmm.
I call it leadership level 1 victim mindset, which is where you really don't believe that you're still living, victim mindset is where you're living outside in. You don't believe that you have any power or say.
Yeah.
And even in the process of upgrading from level 1 to level 2, where you realize that you have sovereign power from the inside out, there's a lot of slips back. I mean, that outside in living is a victim. We don't feel like we have any power. And I started to question my own vision. Did I, re- was I, re- I, it was a journey for me.
What helped you keep on track then? Like, because you can, like you said, you can slip back in. You talked about the practice of gratitude and forgiveness. Was there anything else in there that you did for yourself to kind of, like, when you felt yourself going backwards, you caught yourself and then continued to push forward?
Yeah, it actually, Sue, now that I think about it, it was going back to what we were talking about earlier. I had to slow down and look at, okay, what part of my dream, my vision has come into being that is currently bringing me joy. In the midst of that, which actually kind of facilitated the divorce, I moved across the country to Southern California to my kind of dream location of being in the beauty of nature and just being in the sunshine and walking on the ocean, both for the the salt, the ocean water is very healing, right? It's like it's the same as our tears, right? Emotional healing, but also the joy of just being in nature and recognizing that I loved that there was a part of my life that I really loved and was enjoying. And it also gave me perspective of like so much of that life called that marriage really hadn't been bringing me joy for a long time, but I was still in so much denial and repression from, again, outside in thinking of you're supposed to be married, you're supposed to stay married to the same person for so many years. I lived through as a child 2 divorces. My mom and my biological dad got divorced when I was 2, and then my mom remarried, and I had a stepdad, and they were together until I was 17. And both of those, that was back in the 70s and 80s. There
Hmm.
wasn't a lot of awareness of the impact of that on
Yeah.
children.
Yeah. My parents got divorced in the mid 80s. So, and there was nothing for children either. I mean, there was no internet, there was no anything. And it's funny, I'm in the process of writing my book. And in that, I go back, I talk a little bit about divorce, and you hear it today, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, you go to the internet, you find out about it, you get a counselor, you get a coach or whatever. Back then, when we were going through it, there was nothing. And it was seen as this negative stigma
That's what I
on
was to say. And
people.
there was shame
It
around it.
was,
I mean,
yeah, there was
especially
a lot of shame on the kids. I was in middle school, and I remember, like, I was like maybe one of two in the entire class whose parents were divorced, and you were looked at, there's something wrong with you
oh,
because your
oh yeah,
parents were getting divorced. Yeah, yeah. And
oh,
then
for
you,
sure.
yeah, then that gets mapped on you. And when you're a kid, you don't know what to do with that. How many of us are now in our late 40s, 50s, where our parents divorced way back, and now we're just starting to figure out how to deal with
Right.
it.
I mean, that's part
We
of was
realize how much it messed up all of us for, a better part of 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, that was my big resistance, and interesting that thoughts create worlds, like, and that your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. It doesn't know any qualifiers, right? So it
Right.
doesn't know I don't want to be divorced. It just hears divorce, right? So and who knows? Maybe it was in my cards, or I don't know. But yeah, I that was part of my resistance is I didn't want my son to have to go through what I went through as a child. Now, like my son, I have a son who's 14, and like I think we counted half of the kids in his classes. The kids whose parents are still married are now the minority,
Yeah.
interestingly. And that's another whole topic. We're at a different time, and we now
We
know, again,
are.
going back to neuroscience, the prefrontal cortex, right, which really separates humans from our next closest in the monkey kingdom, right, from chimpanzees and apes, the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is where we do our executive functioning, right? It's what helps us see the big picture. And we now know that that doesn't really start to prune until after age 25. From birth to, in terms of human development, from birth to full adult maturation, it happens in 4 cycles of 7, right?
Mm.
So birth to 7 is when our physical body, then 7 to 13 is our emotional body, 14 to 21 is our mental body. So under 21, right? Still even making mental decisions for yourself. And then that kind of that soul force is from 21 to 28, where we really come into that knowing who we really are. Now, I mean, that our authentic self was there the whole time, but actually having the capacity to observe it and to have
Mhm.
the relationship with ourselves with the other capacities, the mental, emotional, and physical on board is what they is said to take until about age 28. And I know for me, even I remember being 25 and like feeling like something was shifting within me, that I was thinking differently and seeing differently. I started graduate school at 25. It was a poignant time for me. And I've
Mm,
heard other people's mention the same thing. But yeah,
yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of decisions, I mean, look at young people today in their 20s. Of course, I mean, the fact that we have college students pick a major and think it's going to be your career
Life's
for life
work. Yeah.
is
Oh,
is
yeah.
just
It's
kind of
ludicrous.
laughable at this point. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, college is great to just go and hang out with peers. And I remember walking around. I went to Purdue University, and which wasn't a perfect fit for me, but I got a great education. But I just remember walking across campus at that age, thinking, who designed this whole thing? What a great idea. You know, you're for those who go away to college and live on a campus, it's this really cool
Yeah.
life experience. So, anyhow, yes, back to vision.
Rest.
I digress. Well, that's the feminine way, right? We talk
That's
in
okay. I love it. Makes for great
circles.
conversation.
Yeah, and come back. But yeah, I mean, even when we, and I think this is why, some people refer to it as the road less traveled, but it takes a lot of courage and strength to tap into our dream and then to really follow it and to bring our lives into alignment with it, which actually in some ways requires less effort. It's the greater effort is to really continue to affirm and honor yourself, and then the universe does the heavier lifting around you versus thinking I got to make it all happen myself. And so once we really come to believe we're worthy of our vision, which again is that self-worth, self-love, the proud of, the acknowledging wins, the practicing the grateful fors, the rest of it just kind of aligns itself around us. That's what I have found. But again, it takes courage, it takes strength, it takes patience.
Takes work.
It's
Yeah.
it takes work, but it's so worth it. And then the real magic, going back to whole systems in the workplace, if you happen to come across other people who are on a similar journey, and they're kind of, there's some level of alignment between what you're up to in the world and they're up to in the world, and you can collaborate.
Oh, there you go. That's the
That
secret sauce right there.
that's when the magic happens. And that's what I believe we're up to on earth right now. But
Yeah.
we've got to go through this process, because the only way that really happens is when people get to know who they truly are,
Yeah.
because you can only truly partner from from the core. You can't partner from the edges. When you're living life from the outside in, you don't really have anything to partner with.
Right. Because you don't even know what you're looking for.
No,
Uh,
and you don't
yeah.
really know what you bring to the table.
Yeah. That's true.
So because in my early consulting work, I did a ton of work around collaborations. A lot of funders were wanting a lot of nonprofits to collaborate, and which is understandable. They were wanting to do it for, impact and efficiency. And that's when I started doing a lot of core soul work with nonprofits, because I was like, you've got to know the core of what this organization really is about in order to collaborate with others, so that you're not going into otherwise people get into competition, right? You start to be the crabs in the barrel, and you think, well, I'm the environmental nonprofit of this and this, and if you're doing it, then you're taking something from me, right? And there's this fixed pie, and I've got to have my piece of it. So when we do that work and do that, come back to our authentic self, not only are we positioned to collaborate, but we come from that creative source, and we realize, oh, there's not a limited amount, there's this infinite amount, and we can create together.
That's a great point that it's infinite. You think, oh, I just set my goal, my vision, whatever it is, and then I set it and I'm one and done. But no, once you hit it, you can go do more and
Oh,
more.
right.
And when you put more, and then when you put people together that have the same type of vision, or
Yeah.
look
And and
out, look out.
and that's what I think is this amazing opportunity now in the workplace for business leaders who resonate with any of the stuff that we've been talking about, right? This is such a prime opportunity for business leaders to tap into what matters most to them, to bring others around that vision in the organization, and to help them see ideally what matters most to them on an individual level, how there's a collective vision, right? And to be able to work with that. It can turn the workplace from a place of drudgery
Mhm.
into a place of joy and magic and fulfillment.
That's perfect. I was just going to ask you, what are some of the greatest joys that you've experienced working with companies and individuals too, out of what you do?
Well, it's a joy for me to witness them because I'm living on my purpose, right? That's my unique gift to bring to the world is to support them in doing that. Well, one is the story I mentioned earlier, right? These men came together, and after they had a record. It's been 3 years since I helped them clarify a goal and a vision, and to become cohesive around it. That's this new-ish, I should say, concept called organizational health, which is about taking the time to get clear, right? Get on the same page and have that vision be something that you're excited about, and just to watch the miracles start to happen, right? And the work, like, instead of having to chase work, now work comes to them.
Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
world where they came from the world where, you were all submitting RFPs and bid work and lowest price, and now people are coming to them and saying, we just know you do great work, we want you on this project, what's it going to take, right?
Wow.
And even just retelling the story gives me goosebumps, right? Because so many people didn't even believe that was possible, right? How many people, and especially in their industry, the construction industry, would say, are you crazy getting out of bid work and submitting RFPs, right? Like that's ever going to happen. And it's starting to
It
happen.
did. Wow.
Just
Well,
and this is where, right, when we talk about this may be a little out there, but more the quantum, when we tap into our vision and what we love, we're working with the quantum field. It's a whole different set of operating
yeah.
principles.
Yeah. So I have core three questions. I think we already talked about one of them. One of them is share a book or resource that had a significant impact on you.
Oh, sure. I've shared three of them, I think,
Yeah,
today.
I think so.
Uh, well, the science of getting rich, but I will say in my own journey to awakening and having the courage to integrate business and spiritual beliefs or universal laws, I refer to them as. One of my first awakening books was written by a Buddhist monk called Thich Nhat Hanh. Tiny little book. It's very thin, and it's called Being, Being, Peace. And that was one of the first books that helped me start to live from my authentic self, of starting to realize what really was going to bring me peace, because I
Love it.
was tired of being stressed. So,
Yeah, aren't we all? I love that. What is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered it or expanded on the topic?
oh,
I
wow.
know.
What a great question. Let's see. I would love the question about the heart, which we started talking about, and what role the heart has in the workplace and our daily life. How is the heart connected to vision? And the way I would have answered it is, again, going back to science, because I was trained as a scientist as well in neuroscience, that now, well, and I ask people this, if you had to say which, knowing that we're energy beings, where most of our energy comes from, emanates out of our body from, where would you guess? Where would you guess, Sue? Where does most of our
Wh-
energy emanate out of our body from? Where's the energy
Um,
coming
the
from?
energy. Well, I would say from the heart.
Yes, good answer. Now, most people, what do you think most people guess?
Where their energy would come from, their mind, their
Yeah, their
brain.
brain. Most
Yeah,
people guess the brain.
yeah.
And so then I ask people, well, science is actually able to measure energetics in electromagnetic, right? We can measure energy electrically and magnetically. So this electromagnetic frequency, and it's true, the greatest power is coming out of our heart. And then I ask, this is my last little factoid, how much stronger is the energy field that's coming out of our heart than what's coming out of our brain? How much stronger? What would you guess?
Oh, but I guess I would say 20x.
Awesome. You're in the right direction. The accurate scientific answer is the energy that's emanating out of the heart center is 50,000 times stronger than the
Whoa,
energy that's coming out of the brain.
whoa.
50,000 1,000 times stronger.
Wow. My second guess was 100x, but neither of them are close at all. That's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
That
To
is
me, I tell
mind
people,
blowing.
to me, this is the earth is round and not flat
Yeah. Wow.
in terms of a paradigm shift. This is a paradigm shift of understanding
Yeah.
how we as humans work and where our true energy is coming from, because the heart is really where think of all the, in Spanish and French, liqueur, right? The courage, right? In French, the heart is liqueur. In Spanish, it's corazón. Again, that Latin root of the heart, of courage, of passion,
Mm.
of joy, of love. It all comes out of that part of our body. And now science can measure
Measure
it
our heart.
in reality, that and when people, and we all know this, right? Because people say things like, well, put your heart behind it, right? Get your heart in the game. You hear coaches behind, yeah, they were half-hearted the way they did that. So we know this is true.
Yeah. We just don't make the connection on how deep it really is. Like how we just use those words flippantly. Oh, you didn't put your whole heart into it. Oh. I
Right.
just now I have a deeper appreciation for that type of language.
Right. It's true. Or even like we're
Yeah,
talking about the power of words. So it's not just the words we speak, but the energy behind the
behind
words.
them. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Say, speak out of your heart, not out of your head, right? And
Yeah.
it's true. When people talk out of their head, the words just, it's like hearing the teacher from Charlie Brown. Like, "Wah, wah, 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 wah." But when people speak through their heart, it sticks to you.
Yeah. It's authentic. So, oh my gosh, I don't even want to end the conversation, but we have to. So, as we close, this is my last favorite question. As we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Give themselves permission to ask and answer the question, what would I love?
Adele, how can people find you and reach out to you?
Yes, I'm in the process of updating all of that. So my
Okay.
Yinovate.com, Yinovate.com. So innovate with one N and a Y on the front.com. My Instagram handle, which isn't where I want it to be yet, but it's Yinovate same thing, Yinovateyou. And yeah, that's the best place to find me. If anybody's listening as a business owner, that's my passion and dream, is to help support business owners who want to turn their workplaces into a place that helps people live their dream and be
Mm.
the best person they could be through their heart and from their soul.
Well, thank you so much for the gift of your time. This has been amazing. And I can't wait to have you back on the podcast.
I love it. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to it, Sue. You're a wonderful interviewer and host.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.